Welcome to the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Matthew, welcome to Consulting Leaders. Happy to have you.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Let's jump straight into it. What pulled you into the fantastic, yet sometimes a bit stressful job and world of advising CEOs and executive teams?
Oh my goodness. Well, the Percipio Company is my business. That's the company that I am the CEO for. And this, the origins are humble. In 2010, my former boss, we both worked at E-Trade Financial. He left. This is in 2010, remember, and 2010 was a dire year for a lot of financial services companies. It might have been a rebuilding year actually at that point. 2008 was the cratering of a lot of economic indicators at the time. And he went to a different company, and he called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, this company needs you. They need you to come in here, and they need some external help to help them." And it was with a member of their executive team. And so I politely said, "No, I don't want to do that. I've landed over here. That chapter is closed. Like you and I, we don't work together anymore. We both left E-Trade." And he said, "No, they really need you." I said, "Okay." So I went down there. I briefly described the kind of advisory service that I would provide. They said, "Well, take it." I was like a deer in headlights. I wasn't prepared, but I delivered. And that company was LinkedIn. So they were in startup mode then. And that was what launched me into this as a business for myself. It was a side business for 6 years. And then I just started getting more and more traction and bringing more and more value to executives, not only in Silicon Valley, but around the world.
I like that. What's the problem that you solve now with Percipio? Like, what is it that you help people, CEOs, achieve?
Well, the Percipio Company's starting point with CEOs is to get them understanding how biased their own brains are. And bias, as it turns out, is a useful linguistic construct. It's what I built my intellectual property around. It's what I built my approach around, my practical approach, my strategy and tactics are all built around uncovering the hidden and sometimes not so hidden biases that are driving business decisions. And for executives, if they don't understand just how biased their brains are, they're bound to make more mistakes.
Do you have a specific type of CEO that you help, Matthew? Like, is it a specific industry, a specific company size, a specific niche? How do you decide who you work with?
It's a mutual decision, and I don't have any particular industry that I target. I think at some level, the size of the organization matters more. The industry there's always relevance and, expertise in certain industries. But I think as businesses get larger and larger and larger, the nature of the industry, nobody will admit this, but it matters less. And that's why you can see a CEO go from like Intel to PG&E or something like that. I mean, what really matters is how well you make decisions, and part of those decisions is including who you're bringing around you to help you make more decisions.
So I'm with you, and I agree with that. The thing is, am I considering myself a CEO? Let's say founder of a company, at least with at least a few employees. I like to, when I get help, when I get external support, I see how we help small businesses make sense and we help CEOs make sense. But I think be able to relate to, okay, so this person helps CEOs like me because they are in the service industry or in the French accented trying to do business in the US industry. Like, you see, like being relatable or like understanding this is for me helps a lot. And if you manage to get clients without that niching down, that's absolutely amazing. I guess that's what the biggest companies do as well. In your mix, how do you market? How do you brand? How do you get the attention of those CEOs to make a mutual decision? By the way, I like the term, to work together.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's a reactive circumstance. There's problems. They could be strategy problems, growth problems, money problems. There's problems. And in those situations, I call them reactive, and I get brought in to help, sort them out. And a lot of times it has to do with power dynamics. And power is a very useful lens for executives and non-executives to look through. It's often overlooked, but it's often driving a lot of the both performance as well as the problems within organizations. And I think for me, what you described initially is the first of the 5 most common cognitive unconscious biases, which is like me bias. And we naturally gravitate towards people who are like us. We do it in, social situations, professional situations, cafeterias, buses, wherever, you gravitate towards people like you. And sometimes it's just, the person that you know in a room. And when you're in a professional setting, there's nothing wrong with that, but it quickly becomes an Achilles heel if you never get beyond that and you just stay in that kind of safety zone, that comfort zone.
So that makes sense. And that would be the positioning and the messaging. And I see how that vibes with what you worked with so far. What marketing tools do you use to embrace that, Matthew? Like, what has worked for you to get the attention of the CEOs who end up working with you?
Traditional measures, the website marketing, social media marketing, those things, marketing is always hard to tie in dollar for dollar, like what you're spending it on versus money coming in. And when anybody tries to sell me on a proven formula or a 10X formula, I just run the other way. I don't have a lot of time for that. I think word of mouth and my reputation and existing clients referring me to future clients, that's easily made up a greater percentage of my business and my active client base than any magical formula that could be done. I get very cynical, especially nowadays, where, even the people who are experts in that domain don't really understand how the algorithm works, right? Like, you can pay to play and have your thing pop up to the top of a screen or insert it into somebody as they scroll. But, that's, it's powerful. It's very, very powerful that, like, the ability to target people is continuing to improve. And so, but there's still a timing element. Just because you can get your brand or your logo in front of somebody, if they're not ready to receive it, then it's just going to be more noise.
That's a very interesting one that I'm happy to debate on. So websites, referrals, reputation, how do you know this works if you cannot attribute it to anything?
Well, no, I can attribute, I have a client right now who told me he found me on the internet.
Okay.
But just because he's found me on the internet, why was he looking on the internet? Because somebody referred him to me.
Okay.
So, I don't know that that is directly attributable. So I can credit that marketing dollar that I spent on building that website and maintaining it over the years to the money that's coming in from that client.
Yeah. And this is what I like. So I'm going to double down on it because I think that's such an important point for B2B coaching and consulting firms. When we explore a solution, sometimes claimed by some people as being the thing that's going to 10x your revenue, right, or your client base, we think that one tweak will unlock everything. But what we need to think about is that there are stages and steps that people take towards becoming a client of ours. If they don't know you even exist, they're probably not going to hire you. So that person telling them about you, Matthew, is like the origination of like, hey, I worked with Matthew, or I know what he does, and like, you should check him out. Brand awareness. Authority, trust is the next step. Like, how do we show those people that we can actually help them, that we help people like them, like to likeness? That's the website. That's like, hey, this is what we do. We're experts in this. Like, you can trust us. Look at people like you who've gotten results. And then there is the taking action, which is, okay, I'm gonna explore this a little bit further and book a call with them, which I suspect is probably something that happened at the later stage, Matthew. And so like having those different layers and being able to attribute where do people come from on those layers is usually how you get the marketing rolling. And I agree with you. It's rarely a 10x your business by dancing on TikTok for your consulting firm. So that makes sense. Did you try that, Matthew?
I have not tried dancing on TikTok to expand my business, but maybe I wouldn't rule it out right now. Maybe
if it was guaranteed to work. Okay, so that's positioning, that's marketing. How do you drive the sales motion, Matthew? So you get a referral, you get someone to check you out on the website, you get someone who hear about you from your reputation. How do you move from that to an actual, conversation, potentially then a sales conversation, an SOW, a letter of engagement, we rock and roll? Can you walk us through the sales motion at Percipio?
Sure. I think the easiest one to point to is a referral. And I belong to one of the largest networking groups on the planet. It's called Provisors. And it's made up of mostly attorneys, but the members of the group, they come together with that intention in mind. They're going to refer one another business. So you have to figure out a couple things. To be successful in this group, in whatever group that you belong to, where you're engaging in some similar activity. In this group, the 11,000 members in the US, there's approximately half of them are attorneys. So you need to have the ability to connect with attorneys if you're not an attorney. Like, what is your value for them? And that's a conversation that just takes some time to figure out, because they're the ones and the other members of the group who are going to refer you into clients. And once you get that step of that process kind of worked out, then you're coming in on a recommendation from another trusted professional, because you don't get the kind of referrals unless you're trusted. So their process is know, like, trust, and then you get the referrals. And those first three are distinct. Sometimes they magically happen right out of the gate. Like, you meet somebody, you're like, oh, this is it. I know this guy, this person is what my client needs. I can make that introduction unequivocally, because the context is the credibility. And other times it just takes more time to get to know that person if you don't have that kind of circumstances that warrant that urgency around that referral. So I think that goes back to, like, it's much more driven by different variables. There's sometimes I get referrals because there's a sense of urgency around it. there's a immediate problem that's damaging to the business, so I need to talk to this executive and get to the bottom of it. Or there's proactive, like, we're kind of looking at our strategic planning for 2026, and I need, just a fresh sounding board, right? Because the things we're doing are just stagnant.
I want to double down on some of the things that you just mentioned here, because I think they are important. One of the things that you have for you, Matthew, is credibility. And that's not the case of a lot of B2B business owners out there, let alone coaches and consultants, not because they don't have the expertise, just because they haven't built it, they haven't made it visible. How do you, going back to the sales cycle, how do you showcase that credibility that you mentioned? And I have another question, but I'm going to let you answer to this one first.
How do I showcase the credibility that I mentioned? Well, the credibility, I think, speaks for itself, because I took my ideas. I mentioned you my humble origins. I didn't really want to do this, but because I was able to demonstrate success right out of the gate, and that success wasn't just, my, novel idea. And I think there's a lot of consultants, a lot of solopreneurs, a lot of people who have hung out a shingle because they really are passionate about what they think is the, like some kind of secret sauce, or like a great approach, or like it's an aspirational idea of what a business could be. And, I think in some cases, they've consumed their own Kool-Aid, and they don't have any evidence to back it up. They don't have any clients that have used their great ideas and solved problems, or improved productivity, or brought in more sales or money. There's just, they think it's a good idea without having any actual use cases. And I think that's the, at some level, CEOs or anybody just senses it, it. It's like, oh yeah, I love your idea, but I'm not going to pay for it.
Fair enough. And the other question I had was around urgency. That's something that you mentioned, right? Like you're trying to understand the urgency that the referred person has. When appropriate, how do you create or stimulate that urgency in your prospects?
I don't know that I'm really necessarily good at that. I think for the reactive clients, the urgency is there, right? They're coming out of an investigation, a workplace investigation, or something that's really driving them towards, I need to get somebody from the outside to come in and support us. In the proactive situations, it's it almost crosses a line to go from selection to sales, and I try to stay as much as I can in the selection mindset rather than a sales mindset. Does that make sense to you?
It does. It does. And I find it interesting because it's often, at the end of the day, especially the type of people you're targeting, Matthew, they've been there, done that. They know what we're doing, right? So I don't think it's as easy to just push a product or a service to someone who is educated in business than it will be in B2C or other contexts potentially. So I think being able to build that credibility, that trust throughout the sales process, which is why I was asking you about it specifically, and make sure that the solution is a fit is the key objective. Now, my mentor, when I was like reflecting on this and being like, I don't want to, push my services if people are like, yeah, it's not the right time whatsoever. I think we live by this now. But an interesting perspective that he gave me was, if you genuinely think that you can help the prospect, whoever you're talking with, it is your moral responsibility to do everything you can to help them. That's also true when the way to help them is to direct them towards another provider, or maybe a free solution available right now. But if it's your product, it's like, does that make sense to you? I think this can help. Like, let's figure out a way to make it work. And this is where creating an urgency, potentially by saying, hey, look, not solving this problem has cost you that much over the last 6 to 12 months, whatever. Not solving it for another 3 to 6 months is going to cost that much. Not like imaginary, just based on retrospect. And that's where creating some perception of opportunity cost is also interesting when it comes to urgency. Mm-hmm. That's my take, obviously. That's why I was interested into hearing what your thoughts were.
Yeah, I think that's, kind of sales 101, right? Like that's how you're going to structure the conversation when you're in that sales cycle. So I think that the important consideration at that point is to really be cognizant of intention versus impact. And those two things have to align, because impact is always greater than intention. So if your intention by framing a conversation around, a loss or a perceived loss that could happen if you don't take action, is received as, this person's just trying to sell me something, you've lost it. You've lost it. And so I think that's the key point, is just making sure that, what you're positioning is being received how you want it to be positioned.
Amen to that. Tell me a bit more about what happens once someone decides to work with you. How do you, also coming from a certain consulting background, how do you retain? How do you nurture? How do you double down on the engagement that you've had with the clients to keep on providing value, but also keeping them as a client? How do you optimize for retention, Matthew?
Well, in some ways it's a land and expand kind of thing. I may get a client that is an individual coaching client, and I'm working with one person in the organization. And then that client has now come to a decision that coaching isn't just for executives. Maybe they want to use coaching as a retention strategy for their organization. So now I have an opportunity to expand, and I have a team of other coaches that can be brought in. I think I differentiate between coaching and consulting. And so in some cases, in consulting engagements, those have been morphing to looking at the early adopters of generative AI in an organization may have come from the most remote parts of the organization. You could have had somebody that had just been using tools to increase their own productivity, and they're just producing great work, but there's been little or no standardization across the organization. They may not even, there's a lot of companies still today, what's today, February 5th of 2026, who still don't have, they're a Microsoft shop and they haven't opened up the Copilot can for their employees. So it's for people like most of, I think, your listeners who are in this sort of consulting space, they are early adopters at best, or if they're not, then I don't know that they have a lot of business at this point. There's got to be some AI play. That's a standard question now. What's your AI play? And I think that is sort of the a key ingredient for any type of consulting engagement anywhere, for any type of corporate space around the planet.
I like that. Matthew, what's the CEO's advisor's advisor? How do you get, how do you think about growing your business? How do you think about, I know, being coached or being consulted on, if that's something that you do? I'm always interested into understanding. You're a CEO yourself, right? And you help CEOs. Do you get help yourself as well? Like, how does it typically work?
Oh, absolutely. I have my own circle of coaches that I work with. We usually, the two that I'm thinking of right now, we meet once a month, and we just have very candid conversations about how our business is going, which direction it's going, what's working, what's not working. And that trusted circle of conversation is also one that I've started offering. So last year I started offering peer advisory groups, my Percipio Company version of that. And so it's a group coaching model that, for certain geographies, I have one group that I started with last year in San Francisco. And so we meet once a month at 580 California Street, a beautiful executive briefing room. I have another group that I'm building in Napa, in wine country, that is going to be more industry specific just because of the geography, right? You can't, I don't know that there are businesses there that aren't directly related to wine, but that is the epicenter of the wine industry in California. And then I'm building an international trusted advisory group that's more probably for your audience. This is a group of solopreneurs, small business owners, people that want to dream bigger than what they are, and in doing that, put more distance between themselves and their business. And that's something that I find a lot of people who are their business, right? They have that idea and they have some, use cases and some revenue coming in. That's not necessarily their personal income. Like, that's a key distinction for somebody to be able, that's a milestone that many people who are hanging out their shingle for the first time don't get.
Surround yourself by people who've done what you're trying to accomplish is usually a great advice. What's your number one challenge, Matthew, right now? What's the nut that you're trying to crack that's, once you crack, you're going to take the whole thing to the next level?
My own version of what projects do I want to, get my hands dirty with, and what do I want to delegate or maybe outsource? And, that the moment you go that route, you have to have trust. And that's why I branded this new offering, or relatively new, the trusted advisory group is, it's something that I've identified as eroding in the world writ large. Trust in institutions, trust in businesses, trust in one another, trust in it. Just it's taking its toll. And so I think there's some value in intentionally naming it and then allowing it to build the cohesiveness of groups.
Matthew Cahill, ladies and gentlemen. Matthew, if people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
LinkedIn or percipiocompany.com.
We'll put all the links in the description. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.